Hope is an interesting phenomenon. The word sounds like such a good and positive concept. In one sense, it is a waiting for something positive to happen, something that hasn't happened yet. In my 8 years as a hospice chaplain, I learned that hope changes. All too often, hope springs from a darkness, a lack, a misfortune. Obviously, in hospice, the darkness, the lack, the misfortune was the diagnosis that life would likely end within 6 months. There would be no prognosis of restored health. All of life brings hope, which in one sense or another springs from a lack to do what we would wish for, lack for what we want. In spring, we wish that snow goes away and stays away. We wish for flowers to appear. We desire that the gray breaks and that the sunshine appear. We want warmth to return and stay. In summer, we hope for bountiful and sweet fruits. We want pleasant temperatures, warmth in daylight and cool at night. We want rain for lawns, gardens, and fields, but not too much that it would interfere with our weekend outings. A big wish is that the summer would bring recreation of the soul and recreation for the body. The fall changes our hopes again. For everyone's sake, we want a safe and fruitful harvest. We desire relief from the heat of the summer. We hope that the colors of the fall foliage will be brilliant, and by the end of the fall, we seek relief from the yard work. And the winter brings yet another set of hopes. Already at this point, we are wanting relief from the cold temperatures. We want warm clothing when we go outdoors. We hope that our homes will be warm, and we hope that there will be pleasant company with whom we can share the warmth of our homes. Of course, there are many more things we hope for as the seasons change, and the reality is that all of life is much the same as the seasons. We have different hopes as an infant. Infants need loving parents, adequate nutrition, a comfortable environment, proper stimulation, and a whole lot more. And growing children want entertainment, food they like, friends with whom to play and learn, and stimulation that leads to an adequate education. Young adults seek social connection, financial security, adventure, and approval. Elderly people like me hope for adequate housing, good health, proper medical care, and meaningful activities. What we hope for changes with every day of our lives and our particular circumstance. Of course, Maslow's theory of full self-actualization is what I have in mind. I'm thinking that we can't easily move on to higher cognitive thought, that is, into our prefrontal cortex, until the basics of bodily functions and comforts are taken care of. Good decisions can't be made when one is looking for the closest restroom. We can't expect rational behavior from people who are hungry. People who are cold and anxious will have little energy to ponder great ideas. The next slide, please. Whoa, we must be missing one. Okay, it's okay. Anyway, hope in its most positive light is hope that goes beyond immediate discomforts. We can't easily be generous, truth-seeking, or concerned for justice when our body is in need of physical attention due to deprivation or symptoms of illness. When we are worried about paying bills, or worse, anxious about where we will be sleeping tonight or what food we will eat today, because we have no means to secure these. If that's our situation, how can we expect a person to be constructive, compliant, or cooperative? These things became very clear to me while I worked in hospice, where we were not allowed to think about patients in moralistic terms. We had no bad patients. All difficult behavior was connected to uncontrolled symptoms and anxiety, often about various financial issues, or sometimes they were worried about faith or loss of things, or there were so many reasons for anxiety. When I said we had no bad patients, that was the official philosophy. And we tried our best. And what that meant was that hospice care, at its best, is focused on a total life experience of the patient. And I have to say that these are events that happened some time back in my life. Been retired a few years. Our hospice interpreted the rules that were laid out for us by the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, and they stated that we had to, within 24 hours of admission, make an assessment of medical needs. And within 5 days, there needed to be an assessment of psychosocial and spiritual needs. And then at that time, there needed to be a care plan implemented by the hospice, and that care plan was to have included the opinions and ideas of the hospice staff, the patient, and the family. And to the best of our abilities, we tried to manage the symptoms of the patient and the anxieties of both the patient and their loved ones. So often, we began care of patients who had been fired by the area's medical providers. They typically had been fired by their doctors because they had been A, uncooperative, B, dishonest, and or 3, rude, sometimes even combative. And I remember how gingerly we would begin serving some of these cases, and how amazing it was when pain was controlled, everything began to fall into place when there was little or no more difficult behavior. One patient for whom we had great anxiety was a local drug dealer who was definitely opioid dependent. And we set up an elaborate system to make sure that his delivery and use of medication was according to the care plan. In the past, he had tried delivering his prescriptions to various pharmacies, hoping to score multiple amounts of his painkillers from multiple pharmacies. Nobody trusted him. He had a bad reputation for violence, and because of his heavy drug use, he had a very low tolerance for pain, and his body had a high tolerance for opiates. When the staff was able to control his pain, help him with the symptoms of his disease, help him resolve some of his social issues around his criminal past, and let him work on his spiritual issues, everything changed, and he was able to come to peace in his end. And this happened many times, over and over. It wasn't just of some of these rough characters. It also involved some sweet elderly women. They too had difficulties when symptoms were uncontrolled. There were women who would never have thought of causing troubles to anyone. Yet anxiety over family members would keep peace from enveloping them. One beautiful person seemed to have everything in place. Pain was controlled, various symptoms were managed, and yet she was tossing and turning and not at peace. Her problem was that she had a rowdy grandson, and she was very sure that he had not accepted Jesus as a Savior. She wanted him to be in heaven with her at some point in the future. Now, this sweet elderly lady was rather controlling, and the grandson was not about to be converted just to make his grandmother come to peace. Several visits with a woman let her find peace in her having to give up control of her grandson's behavior. There's more to that story, but you understand what was happening. And this leads me to work that I actually did as a chaplain or spiritual care coordinator, which was my title. Our goal as a hospice was to have individuals find, to their best possible means, a peace inside of themselves. A person we followed his teaching, his name was Ira Byock. His writings taught our hospice to seek these 5 sentences from our patients. I forgive you. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And goodbye. Now, we didn't do this in a pedantic manner, saying you need to do these 5 things, but we would listen to people. We would walk with them, walk with the patient, and allowing for the patient's own self-discovery, a self-discovery that could only happen, again, when the symptoms were controlled and with a loving and caring presence. This was the basic tool, providing presence to the patients without demands. All of the staff was taught to use this methodology. The patients didn't have to earn our presence. It was simply given to them. It came on the part of us caregivers by working on our own self-awareness. Now, one of the easy missteps was in the area of the task of joining, and we do that with each other all the time. It's important to offer some sense of commonality with another when we're trying to join someone where they're at. One of the things a person might do is say, oh, I see with the figurines in your curio cabinet that you must like Hummels. Well, that remark is possibly able to lead to a deeper discussion. The temptation on the part of the visitor is to say, oh, I collect Hummels too, and I have 60 of them. And that then becomes competitive and brings focus back to the visitor. So really, the purpose of presence from a spiritual perspective is not to elicit conversation, but to let the patient determine what the presence will offer. A direct question to the caregiver should point the caregiver to the need for conversation. The best practice is to enter with a simple, open-ended question, like, what do you need now? And if the response is nothing, then give nothing, but perhaps the quiet the patient may relish. And then, at most, would you like me to leave? Or shall I hold your hand? And simply close the visit with goodbye. What you need to say depends on the relationship that's already been established and within the boundaries that you already know with that person. The rule is always let the patient take the lead. That is what we are instructed to do as caregivers. I had one Seventh-day Adventist patient who had a near-death experience that did not coincide with her set of official denominational doctrines. She was afraid to have a conversation about it with her pastor, worried that the experience might have been demonic. We had a long discussion. I offered to her an exploration of the important words in the church doctrines that had caused the confusion in her mind. And as she worked, but to let people ponder what was already in their own heart and in their own mind. By being present with people, I was able to hear and observe many wonderful things, and I will share one last beautiful event in my work. I was in a hospital room with much of the family surrounding the father and grandfather of the people in the room. He had suffered a heart attack for which there would likely be no recovery. And while in the room, I observed him sit upright and display quite agitated behavior, and he said, "She's here, she's here." And the family responded, "Who's here?" He said, "Your mom. She's right there at the foot of the bed. And there's a man with her, dressed all in white, and they want me to go with them. But I can't. Their hands are too cold. I can't do it." Sometime later, he again sat up in bed, reached out his arms and said, "I'm ready, let's go." And then he fell back into the bed and was dead. I can't explain anything. What I do know is that for the family, the experience was very healing and allowed them to feel at peace with their father and their grandfather's death. What I know about hope is that when we are freed from our immediate physical concerns and anxieties, we can focus on good things far beyond our present bodily needs. There is nothing wrong with hoping for release from hunger, worry, pain, or whatever else may afflict us. Helping people to overcome those obstacles should be a priority for every human being, as every human being encounters another. As we do for one another, there is then a chance it will be done for us. When we offer compassion to another, we will do more for the universe than when we inflict pain. That is my belief. We are, after all, just molecules that gathered together in order to form material consciousness. Isn't that what Carl Sagan was saying? We are the stuff of stars. I firmly believe that conscious material, which I believe we all are, conscious material has the responsibility to provide comfort to other conscious material in order to bring more harmony in the universe. If there is a moral perspective, a moral imperative, certainly Gandhi must have been close to this in his call for nonviolence, as was Albert Schweitzer with his call to respect all life. My hope is that we will all find the means to be able to offer comfort to one another when we sense pain and discomfort. I also hope that when any one of us is in pain or discomfort, someone will appear with the means to help alleviate or at least cover the misery so that any one of us can be able to offer gratitude to another and to the universe from which we have sprung.